Greetings all, and welcome to the 30th episode of the V.T.P, or the Veteran Trainer's Perspective. Today, in celebration of the release of Generation 9 and recent expeditions into the Paldea region, we are going to be taking a look at the regional variants that exist in the region, as well as new undiscovered evolutions for Pokémon in previous videos covered on this channel. So let's not waste any more time and get right to it.
Paldean Wooper have the same general body form as Johtonian Wooper, but their bodies have a rich brown color to them, with a quartet of thick, bone-shaped gills on the side of the head, as well as a rib and sternum-shaped dark brown mark on their chest. Their evolved form, Clodsire, have large, oblong bodies, with a brown coloration on the bottom of their body and belly, and a darker brown coloration on their top, with 4 broad, 3-toed feet, a dorsal fin of sorts on their back, and a large double-pronged tail on their back end. Their pinprick, beady black eyes are all but hidden on their form above their large mouth, and they have a series of 6 purple spots in their back that mark where they can protrude their 6 large ribs for offensive purposes in emergency situations. In the Paldea region, compared to the Johtonian counterparts, Paldean Wooper are poison ground types, can potentially possess the Poison Point ability in place of the Damp ability, learn the Tackle, Poison Tail, Toxic Spikes, Poison Jab, and Sludge Wave attacks in place of the Water Gun, Mist, Haze, Rain Dance, Aqua Tail, and Muddy Water attacks. And while Wooper are normally known to dwell in freshwater environments in the Paldea region, these creatures have been forced out of the water by the presence of Dondozo in the largest of freshwater environments in the Paldea region, which has caused them to change over time to adapt to the marshlands of the region instead. In response, aside from their bodies changing color, their outer skin and gills have hardened to make them more resilient on the land, and the thin film that otherwise coats their bodies in order to help them retain moisture has thickened and become extremely toxic, effectively removing their water-type attributes and replacing them with poison-type ones as a consequence. In addition, they have acquired the capacity to squirt poison from the gills as a form of direct offense against potential attackers, and often poison many of the other wild Pokémon that are in their territory, but this has also resulted in them becoming much heavier than normal and, while this does allow them to use their sturdy forms to deliver tackle attacks, also means that they are slower than normal. To make up for this, they tend to travel in groups of 3 or 4 members for protection, and thus can be a bit of a handful to deal with if they cannot be overpowered quickly in the wild.
Clodsire are the unique result of Paldean Wooper adapting to their marshy homes as much as they can in the Paldea region, as a consequence of being forced out of their homes by Dondozo, with these creatures being the result of an attempt to evolve into something that can go toe-to-toe with the beast responsible for their ejection in the first place.
Compared to Quagsire, Clodsire are not as fast and have a lot to be desired from offense as well, but they make up for this with greater defenses and stamina, which makes sense as these beasts generally are benign and prefer to fight back against potential predators by just being really hard to overwhelm, and use this power to help ferry weaker Wooper across large bodies of water safely. This is seen even more so with their capacity to acquire the Amnesia technique as soon as they evolve, making them much harder to damage with special attacks, which can help them keep safe against the otherwise impressive offenses of Pokémon like Tatsugiri. Living at the bottom of their habitats typically, these creatures are bottom feeders for the most part like Whiscash, and swallow their prey whole whenever something floats close to them, using their brown body coloration as camouflage on the murky bottoms of muddy ponds and river bottoms, and are able to use their broad bodies to plod through mud with relative ease, thus making it easy for them to navigate their habitats despite their mass. As a result, they can be a handful to deal with in their element, and thus not worth approaching if they cannot be fought from more solid land. In addition to this, it is noted that these creatures have one other special attribute that can make them a dire threat to those that try to attack them and eat them in any capacity. These creatures have 6 large ribs that help to hold their internal organs together, but these ribs can actually be forced out of their body through a series of 6 purple spots on their back, only anchored in place by thick muscle tissue and their sternum, and thus serve a dual purpose. Not only does this make them look even larger and thus a threat to potential predators, but it is primarily a defensive weapon to use against Dondozo in order to harm them, as the ribs have sharp points to them and are coated with a deadly toxin that Clodsire themselves are immune to, but others are not. As such, if they are swallowed whole, they can use the ribs to puncture and seriously poison anything that would dare attack them, often killing them in hours after exposure. This, however, also places these creatures in serious danger, as it leaves their lower belly area and the organs nestled in there in danger of being easily ruptured, so it is often used only as a weapon of last resort against others. Even so, it allows these beasts to learn the Poison Sting and Mega Horn attacks naturally, and thus can be a boon for them, especially against psychic types that might otherwise have a notable advantage over them. As far as their combat abilities are concerned, these creatures retain the same abilities that are possessed by their contemporaries in the Wooper family, and while they might not be all that powerful on their own, they are incredibly resilient against energy-based attacks and have a great deal of stamina to work with, so they have above average base HP and special defense stats for fully evolved poison and ground-type Pokemon, and further possess the highest base HP stat out of all non-legendary Poison-type Pokemon and non-legendary Ground-type Pokemon, tied with Ursaluna for the latter, and thus can take quite the special base pounding before finally falling in a fight. Paldean Tauros look very similar to Cantonian Tauros, but are noted for their dark grey body fur, black mane and shorter horns. In addition, there are 3 breeds of them, with the combat breed taking on this look, the Blaze breed possessing a series of fiery energy ports on their flesh above their head on the shoulders, as well as intertwined tails and much-sharper horns turned towards their front, and their Aqua breed sporting a similar set of blue spots on the underside of their neck and twisted horns that stick out to the sides of their head. In the Paldea region, these creatures are fighting types in the case of their combat breed, fighting fire types in the case of their Blaze breed, and fighting water types in the case of the Aqua breed, can potentially possess the Cud-Chew ability as a hidden ability in place of the Sheer Force ability, learn a number of different moves depending on the breed, and possess slightly increased base attack and defense stats in exchange for slightly decreased base special attack and speed stats. In the Paldea region, Tauros have been bred for countless generations in order to produce a unique variant for the region that is noted for not just its incredible muscle mass compared to Cantonian Tauros, but also an even worse temperament, as they are occasionally used for bullfighting competitions in the region. This increased muscle mass means they also have shorter horns for the sake of protecting humans from being gored as easily, but it also has rendered them pure fighting types in their base form and can be much harder to handle as a consequence. They are able to more easily target the weak points of opponents and attack them with great force in close quarters, but what really makes them unique and stand out compared to their Cantonian counterpart, as noted, is the fact that they exist in 3 different breeds in the Paldea region, and the Blaze and Aqua breeds have their own unique attributes and moves in their type assignments. While all types of Paldea and Tauros are partial fighting types, the combat breed getting access to double kick, headbutt, and close combat in place of the payback, horn attack, and giga impact attacks, there is first the Blaze breed, which are partial fire types. This breed is known for being able to superheat their horns to temperatures of over 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, and are named after the hot air they naturally breathe out through their nostrils. Any attack from their horns will not only leave gore wounds, but also burns as well. They are noted for being able to learn the Flame Charge and Flare Blitz attacks compared to other breeds. On the other hand, there is the Aqua breed, which are partial water types, can swim easily because of the high body fat content in their bodies, and are able to blast jets of pressurized water from their horns in order to help them deliver their Aqua Jet and Wave Crash attacks.
All of this ties in well with their Raging Bull attack, as it changes type depending on the breed that uses it, and thus gives them access to a middle power move that can deal great damage with great combat attributes, making these bulls far more dangerous than it might even seem initially.
As far as their combat abilities go, these creatures are not that much different from normal Tauros for the most part, with below average base HP, special attack, and special defense stats for a fully evolved fighting type Pokemon, but they at very least have all above average base defense and speed stats, and both the Blaze and Aqua breeds have above average base attack stats for a fully evolved fire and water type Pokemon respectively, so they can still hit decently hard and make something of themselves when challenged in close quarters. The Dunsparce have a very similar body form as their pre-evolved form, but are noted for having an additional body segment or 2, and their eyes are now partially open, revealing their pasty, almost cream-colored sclera with a series of blue chin spikes and a blue spiral pattern on the underside of their first body segment, further having a blue cap on the tip of their tail. They also have a pair of blue stripes on their first body segment, with a pair of 2-pointed wings on each segment, although with those with the third segment having 3 blue stripes on their additional segment and a pair of 3-pointed wings on it as well.
Under normal circumstances, Dunsparce are unable to evolve and are complete as is, but in the Paldea region, a recent mutation in these creatures has been discovered that can make them a notable force to contend with.
The genetics of Dunsparce in this region have been proven to be more unstable than in other regions, and this especially applies to the signature Hyper Drill attack. Because the attack requires them to infuse the move with their unique mystical powers, these creatures must draw it forth and energize their form with it in order to make the most of the move. This in the process, however, can trigger genes in their body to change and initiate mutation, resulting in the bodies growing in size and length, adding segments as they transform into the longer and more powerful evolution, the Dunsparce. This in and of itself, though, comes with its own quirk, as has been noted that while most of the time evolution results in the addition of a single extra segment in their bodies, in rare cases, there is the chance that they will instead further mutate and instead add 2 segments to this form. This mutation does not really affect their combat attributes in any meaningful way, and thus is just a genetic quirk that can affect their form, but it is nonetheless worth noting here for the sake of clarity. Furthermore, unlike their pre-evolved form, the Dunsparce do not turn tail and run when they are confronted by others that wish to do them harm. These beasts use their massive tail drills to bore their way into deep bedrock to make tunnel homes, going as far as 6 miles or 10 kilometers underground, and if they are confronted by someone in their burrow that wishes to make a meal of them, they will employ a secret weapon to remove them from their presence. The segmented forms of these beasts allow their lungs to grow long and narrow, and because of this, they can be inflated rapidly and dramatically with a much greater surface area to them. Once they have inhaled sharply, these beasts will blast out the offender with a concentrated burst of air and sound, not only pushing them out of their tunnel at high speeds, but also allowing these beasts to learn a powerful hurricane and boom burst attacks late in life. However, it is also important to note that these creatures are known to be very gentle and benign otherwise, for if there's a creature that wanders into their lair by accident and does not wish them harm, the Dunsparce will instead pick them up and gently guide them back to the entrance of their tunnel with a polite warning. This can make them really easy to get along with, and thus make for great friends to have on one's team, even if they might pack more bite than bark otherwise in a fight. They can equally make for great combatants, as most of their base stats are above average for fully evolved normal type Pokemon, with the exception of the base special defense and speed stats, and thus can prove to be more than worth relying on if needed. Farigiraf have the same basic body form as their pre-evolved form for the most part, but their main body has turned an orange color, with cream-colored lower legs and underside, black two-toed hooves with a long dark brown neck with brown speckle marks on the torso and orange speckle marks on the neck, additionally having a series of sharp cream-colored spines in the back with brown bases that run down the length of their neck all the way down their back. Their neck and tail have been fused together in this state, with an orange lower coloration on their primary head and beige color on its upper form, alongside a large pink nose and dark brown eyes, and the top of their head has a covering of hardened black flesh from the tail head fusing and covering their primary head, still retaining large brown eyes with yellow sclera and acquiring a series of 4 black bulbous antennae on the top of their head used for transmitting psychic energy.
Farigiraf are a unique evolution to the already unique Pokemon Girafarig, and their existence is the consequence of the twin brains of their pre-evolved form finally developing the capacity to directly link together to foster a sense of unity between the two systems.
Normally, the primitive brain that resides in the tail is incapable of higher thought, and is more animalistic in its functions than the primary brain in their head. But when it comes to executing their signature twin beam attack, it requires that the two finally unite their mental powers in order to use the attack. In doing so, it triggers a mutation in their genes that causes them to grow and develop a strong neural network between the two of them. In essence, a series of cable-thick nervous tissue develops between the two as the head and tail effectively fuse into one, their brains not being linked telepathically like in some like Doduo, but directly through actual tissue. This fusion also causes them to lose their tail entirely, as the body of the tail stretches and hardens over their neck, forming a double layer of tissue there that helps to keep them protected against direct attack in that fashion. Altogether, this unity of mind and body amplifies the psychic potential of these creatures by a factor of 10, as they use their antenna to communicate with and attack others with psychic power, thus making them far more powerful offensively, and are able to use their strength to great effect in battle. However, this system is not entirely perfect, as while the two brains can now work together to keep vigilant watch over their territory at all times, even while one head is sleeping, it also means that their minds tend to react faster than their body does in some cases, making it harder for them to properly coordinate their movements in turn, though this is usually only an issue if they are forced to act quickly on their thoughts. As far as their combat abilities go, these creatures are not to be scoffed at as a result of the new offensive and defensive attributes added to their form and evolution. First, it is important to note that the tail neck that covers their primary neck can work as an effective suit of armor for the creatures, as when they go to attack directly, the tail head will actually stretch out and cover the entirety of their primary head, allowing them to protect their brains before lashing out and whipping their necks and head around violently, slamming them into unsuspecting opponents in powerful headbutting and swinging attacks. This also serves to keep them protected against specific types of attack, as the added armor covering them grants them unique access to the signature Armor Tail ability, a base ability that keeps them protected from all moves that have increased priority. Plus, the second head also allows them to have Cud Chew as another possible base ability, which allows them to chew a held berry twice to gain its effects twice over, whenever the effects of the berry would otherwise activate. With Sap Sipper as a hidden ability added onto this, it can render these creatures a potential menace, but there is a word of caution to be had with their usage. Though they normally rely on their primary brain to direct their combat functions, if they are desperate, Farigiraf will instead allow their brain and their tailhead to take over, which can cause them to act much more ferociously than normal at the expense of higher cognitive thought. As such, they might hit harder and with greater gusto, but they can equally be harder to control, and thus a hazard to anyone that gets in their way that isn't clearly an ally. As far as his stats are concerned, it's noted that these creatures are not the most gifted when it comes to resisting special attacks and mobility, the base special defense and speed stats being below average for a fully evolved normal and psychic type Pokemon, but at the very least they have some strength in other categories with an above average base attack stat for a fully evolved normal type Pokemon, and above average base HP defense and special attack stats for fully evolved Pokemon of both of their types, so they can definitely prove to be a well-rounded threat to deal with in the right situations. King Gambit have the same general body form as their pre-evolved form Bisharp, but two sets of additional rib blades have developed that stick out far past their arms, Their head blade has grown immensely in size and height, and they have developed a set of black, red-rimmed blades that jut out of their face like a mustache, formed with hair heavily laced with metal. In addition, they have hair elsewhere, as they have developed a thick mane of black metallic hair that flows down to the ground, and they often use it as a makeshift seat on the ground, taking a shogun-like stance at every moment possible.
While Bishop on their own are potent commanders and can make good use of their power to overwhelm opponents, in the Paldea region, radioactive isotopes in the head blades of these creatures, unique to this region, can allow them to elevate their powers to a higher plane in the right situations.
Namely, they require the broken crest of another Bisharp, an item called the Leader's Crest, and must prove themselves to be superior to their peers by defeating 3 other Bisharp while holding it that are leading a pack of Poniard under their control. If this happens, it can cause a sudden surge of energy to erupt forth from the broken blade, facilitating their evolution into the ultimate stage, King Gambit. In this state, the beasts grow a thick mane of hair that are used as a seat, and take on the position of a military tactician, sitting in place and only attacking when they feel the need to truly demonstrate their power, acting very much like a shogun in the process. While they sit on their flowing hair with calm and poise, these beasts are only a bit more intelligent than normal Bisharp, using their battle experience as a controlling tool instead, as they direct large groups of Poniard and Bisharp to attack relentlessly, pushing and pushing until they simply overwhelm opponents with sheer force and numbers. Despite this, these creatures are feared by their pre-evolutions and respected greatly, to the point that others will gladly sacrifice their life to protect their King Gambit leader. This attribute feeds well into their Supreme Overlord ability, which they have access to instead of Inner Focus, and increases their anger and in turn the power of their attacks a little bit for every fellow fighter on their team that is defeated before they hit the battlefield. And while they might be calmer than either Poniard or Bisharp, their signature Kowtow Cleave attack, which is acquired immediately after evolution, more than shows that they are still incredibly devious and will gladly use trickery to win if needed. Evolution might result in a moderate decrease in their base speed stat, but the increase in their other base stats and overall power more than makes this trade-off worth it, and King Gambit a serious threat to contend with if they cannot be taken out quickly. This is also evident in their base stats, as while they still have below average base special attack and speed stats for a fully evolved Dark and Steel type Pokémon, the latter more than ever before, they are still able to take blows quite effectively and deliver them with both stamina and offensive power, their base defense and special defense stats being above average for fully evolved Dark type Pokémon, and their base HP and attack stats being above average for fully evolved Dark and Steel type Pokémon, additionally possessing the highest base attack stat out of all non-Paradox Dark type Pokémon, and rendering them a true threat to face without strong physical defenses on one side. Annihilate have the same general body shape as their pre-evolved form, but are noted to have had their skin color changed to a mottled dark blue-gray color, and the power limiters on their legs and wrists have broken if they are not missing entirely, signifying that they have ascended beyond the normal limits of their body. In addition, their face and head are covered in a mane of thick, wispy white hair, and their eyes have turned a neon red color, losing their pupils altogether as they and the rest of their form become a beacon of pure rage in physical form.
Primate are more than well known for their extreme rage issues and the health problems it can cause them, and in some cases if they become too angry, it can cause them to experience a slew of medical problems that can ultimately end their life, the only time where they will ever feel a sense of peace in their hearts.
However, this is only the case for those that do not learn how to make the most of their anger, and not by controlling it, but by letting it run wild within their minds and hearts. These creatures can eventually gain access to a unique and potentially devastating attack known as the Rage Fist attack, and this move draws power directly from the rage they have stored in their hearts as a fuel source. If they use this attack at least 20 times successfully against opponents, these apes can learn to master its use and allow the rage in their hearts to grow to such an immense degree that their physical bodies cannot handle it on their own. This in turn will cause the limiters on the limbs to crack and break, unleashing their full wrath and anger within their bodies and facilitating their rise to a higher plane of existence, resulting in them evolving into Annihilate. In this ascension, they become partial ghost types and gain access to the Shadow Punch attack immediately after evolution, and from now on, they will seemingly become docile and much calmer than ever before. This is only to hide the immense rage that now fuels their forms and powers. As Annihilate, these beasts are able to make the most of their power by restraining themselves outside of battle and only outside of battle, as once they begin to fight others, they will show no mercy to anyone that gets in their way. Though they might not look all that much more powerful than their pre-evolved form, these creatures are able to use their rage to fuel every single move they make, and because of this, instead of using any sort of standard martial art or other fighting style, these beasts will lash out with graceful yet brutal strikes with their fists and feet to deal monstrous blows one right after another in a combo that can be very hard to break because of the sheer force being put into their attacks. This could normally be enough to damage the tissue and musculature of their physical body because they do not hold back in any way, but because of their heightened state, they are highly resistant to the effects of pain and can use their own rage to actually heal themselves with every blow, thus allowing them to attack with soul-shattering blows without needing to pause their attacks at any time. This can make these creatures difficult for both sides to handle, as Annihilate will only ever listen to those they've already bonded with, or consider to be fun to spar with, and they only ever enjoy fighting with those that have intense rage in the hearts and minds like they do. This can make it hard to fight these creatures one-on-one, as they do not get riled up over anything in stark contrast to their pre-evolved forms, but they make up for this calm disposition with ruthless aggression once it is actually time to attack and fight others. They might not seem like the most powerful fighters on offense alone, but with access to Inner Focus over Anger Point as a base ability, and plenty of extra stamina to work with, there is little doubt that these beasts can be a nightmare to tackle head-on, and more than capable of pouring fear into the hearts of all those that go up against them. As far as the stats are concerned, much of their pre-evolved form, these beasts are not the best when it comes to using special attacks and taking physical damage, and thus have below average base defense and special attack stats for a fully evolved fighting and ghost-type Pokémon, but they make up for this in almost everywhere else, with their base attack stat being above average for a fully evolved ghost-type Pokémon, their base special defense stat being above average for a fully evolved fighting-type Pokémon, and their base HP and speed stats being above average for a fully evolved Pokémon of both of their types, thus giving them the agility and stamina they need to really make the most of their signature Rage Fist attack in combat.
That should do it for this time, so stay tuned as we will soon be looking into the Paldea region and its Pokémon even more closely, both in normal videos and here on the V.T.P. Thank you for watching this video. It brings me great joy to be able to speak to you all in the world each and every time we meet like this, to explore the many different facets of both the world of Pokémon as we know it, and the world as we live it, through every adventure we have with Pokémon by our side. If you'd like to, please subscribe, ring the bell and all that jazz to keep yourself updated on content uploads and other materials of the like. You can also follow me on Twitter if you'd like to know right away when something new is uploaded, and my written works, from which most of this is based on, can be found on DeviantArt. Links to both can be found in the description down below. Remember that the world of Pokémon is a place full of wonder and mystery, and you never know what to expect. So, stay vigilant, keep watch, and always be prepared for the unexpected. Until next time, trainers and friends of all sorts, have a wonderful time.